You're listening to Catholic Family Podcast, Episode 21.
Thanks very much for listening to the Catholic Family Podcast. I'm Kevin Davis, and I'm happy to be joined again by my mother, Lisa. And we're going to talk today about a topic that I think is very important in today's Catholic society and society in general, and calling it the Catholic family planning topic, I suppose. And it's not to be confused with the other family planning, which people are probably sitting around getting a little bit white knuckled about, but no worries. That's not actually the topic. We're talking about a little bit more about the family culture. And I do have to mention before we get started that if anyone's wondered why I've had a few less podcasts, I started a new job, as I told you before, but I've also been I had COVID for the last 10 days now. It's been pretty much like a normal cold, but I've been a little bit under the weather, so I've been a little slow with my podcast. I do have at least 8 more days of quarantine though, so podcast will be hopefully coming out maybe every day for the next week. We'll see. I've got a couple planned I'm really excited about, but today, of course, I am joined again by my mom, and we'll talk about Catholic family planning. So, Mom, thank you for being here.
Hello, Kevin. How are you?
Besides having COVID, I'm doing all right. And like I said, I mean, pretty mild symptoms. I know I told people I had COVID and everyone's like, oh my gosh, prayers coming your way. And I appreciate it, but it's, pretty much, it's a mild cold for me. And I mean, being fairly healthy, and Ina also, it's been okay. It's not too bad. So keeping your prayers more the people who are elderly or sick, and people who might need them a little more than we do. But yeah, so the topic today I think is a good one. I mean, you, Mom, have raised 10 kids now, I guess, mostly to adulthood. I guess the last 2 are not quite to adulthood, and you have several that are married, several that are religious. And so I think it's a topic that you can give at least some good opinions on in regards to Catholic family planning. And so where do you want to start?
I don't know. I think, like you said, it's a question I'm asked a lot when you have as big a family as we do, and especially we are homeschoolers, and we're kind of out there. We're spread all over the world, not just the country,
right?
And because we have religious too, I think a lot of people say, "Well, how did you do that?" And like, well, you know what? I cannot give you an outline for your family. I cannot do that, but I think that what a lot of people don't necessarily consciously think about is making their own plan and making a Catholic plan for their family. We've learned from so many people through the years and have been blessed to know so many religious. I was taught how to teach by Sister Rita Lawrence, a wonderful Catholic sister back in the day, and she taught me to teach, and so I have benefited so much from her and from the example of really stellar families in my life. But all that put aside, Dad and I still had to make our own plan. And we actually, years and years ago, read, when you were a baby, it was a Protestant homeschool catalog of all the crazy things, but a particularly well done homeschool program and catalog. And they had a lot of interviews that they would write out interviews and had essays in the pages of the catalog. And one of the ones that resonated with us early on, when we were just trying to figure out our life, was that you should not only make a family plan, but a family philosophy and a family goal. And that you shouldn't just have a vague idea about it. You should get a notebook and write it down and make a specific plan based upon what your goals for what you want your family to look like, what you want your family to be. And their Protestant idea was slightly different from ours, but in some ways it was pretty close, that we wanted a God-centered family. So we actually did have for years, and I wonder what happened to it, the notebook with our family philosophy and plan in it. And I don't know if you remember, there were years when things started to get dicey in the family. We would pull out our notebook, and we had Sunday night family meetings. Do you remember those?
I do.
Yeah, we would have meetings, right, when things were just falling apart. It's like, all right, Where are we having a problem? We would pull out the notebook, and then we would make a goal for the week for the kids. We'd say, okay, kids, this is what's not going well. And we would work it through. And as the years went by, I think we did that less and less. I think it was, we got to be old hands. We just took care of it one problem at a time more. But it was extremely important for us as a young family to have that goal in our minds when we made decisions. You want to think that, well, you kind of know what you want and you should be able, no, you can't say I kind of know what I want for my family. You need to write it down. It's almost like the idea of going to church, and there is a whole school of thought out there in the world that you don't need to go to church. You can find God in nature. It's like, yeah, right.
Right. Well, and we've been listening to a lot of talks and sermons about the Vatican II changes and all that happened. And I think that's a really interesting point, that a lot of what changed, one of the great errors that was brought in the heresies, was indifferentism. And it's religious indifferentism. But it literally, I think it connects also with the family. Like you say, it's kind of that idea of, we'll wing it. We'll figure it out. As it comes, it'll come. Or also even so that each way is right. Everyone has their own right way. And as you said at the beginning, every family does have their own way. Of course, that's absolutely true. But there is still only one truth and one, actual end. So the end goal, of course, is for all of us to go to heaven. And the indifferentism is, we all get there somehow eventually. And exactly as you say, the Catholic Church is there to give us a plan on how to get to heaven. And I think that works perfectly with what you're saying, is that we need to have a plan for how to get our kids to heaven and through life.
Right. And don't think you're going to wing it and come out okay. I mean, there are certain things that you can and will and have to sort of wing it. But in the grand scheme of things, you need to have a written, don't just think it, write it. Know what it is you're actually going for. And then the church is our map. I mean, the church provides our map. So it's for those people. There's an analogy or that I wanted to touch upon, that I just thought it was kind of funny, because Dad and I like to watch. We like to watch these races, these race shows. They go through. Don't ask me why. It's just they tickle us. These amazing race shows where you have a group of people and they have to go over these really difficult terrain and see who wins in the end. And they, have these challenges. There's a particular one is called The Amazing Race in America. I think there's a European one too. And then I'm going to read you what the description is of this show, because it's an allegory to life and it has to do with planning. Okay. It's an international race split into several legs, with teams of 2 who deduce clues along the way, navigate an unknown territory, interact with locals, perform mental and physical challenges, travel by airplane, boat, taxi, and whatever transportation options are available, all on a limited budget. Now, is that the perfect allegory for parenthood or what?
Right.
And here's the thing, teams can be eliminated. You don't want to be eliminated, but you can fall completely off course and blow it, and then you're out of the running. This also happens in parenthood and in life. But Dad and I just thought that was the perfect allegory.
It is, yeah.
But there are some obvious differences. And number one of the biggest one is that, unlike the Amazing Race, where they do give you clues that you have to sort of figure out, we have the benefit of the church. And the church isn't just giving us goofy clues that we have to sort of try to figure out. They're not vague. They're very clear. Some of the main problems and structure of our family life are already taken care of for us by the church.
Right.
We have a map. God is not just throwing us out willy-nilly and saying, here, you figure it out yourself. No, he gave us the church to help us figure it out. And it's very clear. He talks to us about through the church on so many different topics that relate to our day-to-day and in our big picture planning. How are we going to educate our children? Well, there's an encyclical on that. If you have any questions, go look it up. If you want to figure out about your marriage in general. I mean, there is nothing that the church does not give us wisdom concerning. You can find it. And the the race architect is not trying to trip us up. That the race architect is trying to get us to the end. He wants every single person in the race to win the race. So that's a big difference in this allegory. And we can do a lot of and there are a lot of things that what job you take, what schooling that you choose can be very personal to you, but they still fall underneath, the general outline of what the church wants us to be looking at. Whenever you are making a decision, your educational opportunities, the neighborhood you move into, the set of friends that you have and your children have, your vocation or your vacation, any books and things as small as books you read, movies you watch, they all should answer the one question: as a Catholic, do these things bring us closer to God? And if you have that goal very clearly delineated for yourself and your family, that everything that we do, we want it to bring us closer to God, then that will solve a lot of your problems. I mean,
right.
you put yourself in the hands of God and you let him know very prayerfully. I mean, don't make it sort of vague, make it very clear. Go to mass, offer it to God. I mean, when we were married and you too, you have that bouquet that you set in the many Catholic marriages in the wedding. You take that bouquet and you put it at the feet of the Blessed Mother. And I think that's not just a pretty thing you do. I think that's a promise and a request. Like, okay, I am laying my family and myself as the mom, because it is the bride that puts the flowers at the feet of the Blessed Mother.
Right.
I am laying my life as a mother and a wife at your feet, and I am depending upon you to guide me through and help me do the will of God. And if you make that part of your family plan and as a wife and, as a married couple, it will help lead you into every other decision that you have to make.
Right. And I think, I imagine people are probably listening to this and saying, yeah, of course that's right. But it's a little intimidating maybe, because I think people I hear that you say everything has to be done for God and everything needs to be given to God. And I think your instinct, or my instinct at least, is to say, that doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun. I mean, that sounds really hard. It sounds like that you want me to raise my kids in a monastery. I'm bringing them to a Benedictine, to monastery or a convent. I mean, so I think that's something that I'd really like you to answer is how do you do this? How do you have a godly life, a godly centered raising of your children, but it's not, you're not, lashing them at night or something, how do you make it a little more enjoyable? I guess they're kids.
No, that is an extremely pertinent question. I think that, that is a big problem, I think, that we have as traditionals, that people assume that you're wearing hair shirts, and you're disciplining your children within an inch of their lives. And I don't think that's true at all. I think a big part of your family plan should include teaching your children to enjoy life, while at the same time aiming for heaven. And if you're aiming for heaven, you enjoy life more. And I think that you don't know that until you do it, perhaps. I think that it takes a lot of pressure off of you when you are leading a truly Catholic life to begin with. It does not add pressure. It takes pressure off. Talk to a religious. The religious will tell you that it's the greatest piece. The obedience part is a wonderful piece, because you know that if Reverend Mother says do this, you do it because it's God's will. It's God's will. If Reverend Mother or the bishop says do this, you do it. It's God's will, and it just takes the pressure off. You're doing what you're supposed to do. We actually, I think, have more pressure on us as lay people in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at the age. I always tell people, look at the age of people who lived during the 1500s. You had the laborer lived until they were 40. The housewife lived sometimes till they were 25. I mean, dying in childbirth and very hard times. And the people who lived till they were 100 or 90 years old were almost always the monks. They were the ones who had, they had a very regulated lifestyle. As you say, they had obedience. They had simple lives in less stress. And so it was in a way easier. I don't want to say easier. It's different. I mean, I guess easier in a way, harder in a way as well. But I think that's a really good point. That I think that's what we will never have a life without stress, as I'm sure you can say, that there will always be stress. Life is hard for parents, and you have to make tough decisions. But I think that would be a nice thing. I would love to have a life in a family that is more like the joyful side of a Benedictine monastery than the strict, whipping yourself.
What? We didn't provide that for you?
No, you did. Yeah, but I guess you have to tell everyone else. I mean, how did you provide that? I had a mostly good childhood. I can't complain too much.
Well, there's always something to complain about.
There is always something.
So I think when you put yourself in the hands of God and you are truly seeking God's will and truly doing that, I mean, you really are. You're going to have all kinds of roller coaster in your life. You're going to have, it's not going to be perfect. Your children will have things to complain about. It doesn't matter. You can be the Blessed Mother. Let's face it, the Blessed Mother and St. Joseph lost Jesus in Jerusalem.
True.
Okay. I mean, there's always going to be you're going to drop balls. You're going to have issues. You're going to have problems. You're going to have periods of time when you are just at wit's end. But if you you always have to recommit yourself to this idea, and your father and I have done this so many times through the year, we'll find ourselves sort of sliding. It's like, whoa, pull ourselves back up again. If you recommit and you truly do want God's will, he will make it happen. Not in the way you expect, mind you, but he will make it happen. We moved out how many times? 8 times in 13 years, some crazy amount of. And it's because we were always saying, all right, God, you want us to do this? Okay, do you want us to do this? And we, weirdly enough, looking back, even though a lot of those moves looked like mistakes at the time, it's like, oh, well, that's why we had to be at that place at that time, because this kid needed this influence. You know what I mean? But it always felt like we were stumbling along, but we were stumbling along, but we always were recommitting our lives to the will of God. And then did not like we're saints, because we are extremely flawed people. But looking back now, you see, and we can start to see, even at our age, and we're in our mid-50s, where God fills in the gaps. Like there were times when our homeschooling was a wreck. I was on bed rest with preeclampsia and things like that with our last 2 or 3 kids. And it's like, did we homeschool at that time? I don't know. Did we? I don't know how it happened, but y'all ended up being great students, maybe just because you had to be. I don't know. But I mean, that's just one example. There's so many ways that God will fill in the gaps if you do put yourself in his hands. And if that is a conscious part, and that's, I think conscious is really mindful before this whole COVID thing. And when people were, there was COVID has taken over our brains. But before this, you heard a lot about mindful parenting. And this was in the lay people world out there in the, not necessarily talking about it in a religious sense or in a Catholic sense, but there's a lot to be said for mindful parenting, for purposeful living, and not just parenting. And if you are mindfully giving yourself to God's will, you'll find that even when you think things are falling apart, somehow he fills in the gaps. He pulls it back together. And when you feel sometimes that things are the most ragged, you have to mindfully take yourself back and put yourself back in God's hands. And you will do that so many times over your life. The saints did too. And you read the lives of the saints. That's one of the beauties of reading the lives of the saints, because you read how most of them feel like, oh, boy, am I blowing it,
Right.
But then they end up being this amazing Saint Anthony of Padua, or Saint Teresa of Avila, or, but they had the same problems we did, the same raggedness, it feels like life is this long struggle. Well, it kind of is, but going back to the idea that it doesn't have to be misery. It doesn't have to be misery. I mean, I think that a big part of being truly, and I hate to use the word religious because that's got the wrong connotation sometimes, spiritual, godly, is that there is so much joy in it. There is so much joy in being godly, because it's like, okay, you got this, God. Okay, I'm messing it up, but okay, I'm counting on you. And if that is your mindset, you will have a joyful life. And there are so many, I mean, we're talking big picture right now, but there are a lot of small picture things. You make the big picture goals, and you literally write out, this is what I want my family to be. This is what I want my family to be like. Okay, then you have your little picture goals, more your day-to-day, year-to-year goals. And those will change, and be ready for them to change, because you have to be, you have to be ready for God to decide he wants to move you in another direction, because he will. But that still doesn't change the fact that, for instance, and I actually wrote it out because, my brain is old. Every individual day, your children and you yourself should realize that, you need to have your day bracketed by certain things. And number one, the first thing is your prayer life. Now, you don't want to make this a big, hard, hideous chore and, that your children hate. You don't have to pray for a half an hour before you start school, but you do need to recommend your day to God. You say your morning offering. What do we used to do? Your morning offering, your angel prayer, those are non-negotiables. You have to have those in. And how long does that take? 30 seconds. Then we would do the acts of faith, hope, and charity, just because everybody should know them, and because they should bracket your life. What's in those three simple prayers should hold your whole life. And then we would say good morning. We would say good morning to the saint of the day. And we usually had one of the children was the kid of the day that got to go look and see who the saint of the day was. And they got to say saint. Oh, it was a funny one today. I can't remember it. It was such a funny one to pronounce. Elphidia, Saint Elphidia or something like that today.
Okay.
Yeah, see, that used to be William's job to find the saint of the day for me. And now I have to do it, But anyway, so so that should be, you have to have something simple. It doesn't need to take 5 minutes, but it should be the beginning of your day. It should start your day. And then your evening prayers. And it don't need to make them long and involved. You just need to, do your act of contrition is a big one. Your guardian angel prayer, again, we always do it twice. And then I don't know if do you still do your 3 Hail Marys?
No. Mm-mm.
Well, we still do the 3 Hail Marys. A lot of people do the 3 Hail Marys for our vocations, for a happy death, and for the virtue of purity. Are the 3 that we do. But there are a lot of different, and what's that take? 30 seconds to do 3
Right.
Hail Marys. And you're not asking a lot. But another thing too is that I always remember when you pray the rosary and the daily rosary, if you can watch a movie for an hour, you can fit a 20-minute rosary in. I mean, that is not, I think people, and the devil's a big part of this, want to put that in there as is the most difficult weight to bear, that 15 or 20 minutes. Oh, brother. Oh, come on. Don't kid yourself. It's not hard. You can fit it into your life. And it's a very good thing to make it a standard time that you do it. And that's a problem that we had in our life. It kind of came and went this time, and, kind of moved around. But it's an important thing to do. It's 20 minutes of your life. And how important is that? Read all of the promises of the Blessed Mother for saying the rosary. How can you not do that for your family? Holy moly. You need her. Trust me. You really, really do need her. And you need to recenter your brain. And a big part of bracketing your day with your daily prayers is because you are recommitting yourself, you're recommitting your family to God, and you're pulling yourselves out of the worldly world, which is so important today and so difficult. And a thing that another comparison is, if you think of the world as a downhill escalator and you are going up, you want to go to heaven, you're going up, but you are on a downhill escalator.
Right.
You have to do those things that keep your legs moving upward. And if you think that you've got the status quo and, okay, I'm good, I'm happy with my life. Oh, no, you're not. Because as soon as you stand still, you just go right back down.
In my impression, and I'm obviously a pretty fresh parent, Sophia is only 14 months now. So I don't have the experience of being a parent, but I guess I would think that the prayer life, especially, I would imagine most of the time it's actually harder for the parents than for the kids to do it. I mean, the kids are shapeable, they're moldable. They're kids. They're literally there to be told what to do. They want to be told what to do. Now they act like they don't, and they say they don't, and they whine and they complain. But kids hate not having structure. Look at our society. Look at the kids who have issues. Look at the kids who go and do mass shootings and do all these terrible things. They're almost always without parents, or at least without one of their parents. They don't have that structure. They don't have the mold that shaped them into what they should be. And they desperately want it. They crave it, even if they say they don't. And I think the devil is so brilliant in how he has managed to destroy families in so many different ways, and breaking apart marriages and breaking apart, the importance of having children at all. But also he's done it. He's so smart that he makes society and he makes parents believe that they have to be the best friend of their kids. They have to be buddies. They have to always get along, and the kid has to be always right, which of course is psychotic. It's absolutely psychotic. It's like, why on earth would I want a 5-year-old to get what they want? They don't know what they want. They're a stupid little kid. I mean, come on. Or even when they're 15. I mean, when I was 15, I didn't know 2 + 2 type of a thing. I mean, your brain is literally still growing and still shaping itself. You have to be shaped. And I think that's, in my opinion, one of the great evils of the world is parents being too soft, thinking that they can't give structure, thinking that, oh, my kids don't want to pray today. And as I said, I think that if the parents don't do it, because I struggle too. I don't always want to pray. I don't. It's terrible. There are many times like, I don't want to say the rosary. I want to go watch a movie or whatever. I'm an adult, and I try to be a good Catholic, and I still struggle all the time with not wanting to pray. But I think, don't let the devil and the temptation of saying, oh, my kids can't do it. I mean, you got to be the ones who've got to be strong and saying, okay, for goodness sake, this is going to be the schedule. Like you say, write it down and then stick to it. This is the schedule. We're getting up, we're praying, and we're going to bed and we're praying too. And I want to say too, and I don't know if you were going to bring this up, but one of the things when we were growing up that made a big difference for me, and this is just an example of how we enjoyed our faith, and I think how you and Dad did a good job of making it so it was pleasant, was that we would pray the rosary, and then we'd read the lives of the saints, and then we'd read another book. And so there was always this, you always look forward to, we'd read Lord of the Rings, or when we were older, or The Hobbit, or all sorts of good books. But even before, we'd read the lives of the saints, and you guys made it a game that we'd always have to guess the date of their death or their birth, but usually their death. And as a very competitive family with four boys at the start, especially, that was really interesting for us because we wanted to be the one who got it right. And it actually gave us interest in the saints. And it gave us interest in the story, even if it was trivial. Kids need trivial things. Kids, there are not many Saint Teresa of the Little Flowers who are 13 years old and want to join the convent. That's not the norm. That's why she's a saint. I mean, usually kids they're kids. They need triviality, and they need to be told or are given a reason to enjoy the faith. And I think that was just an example for me that really made us want to learn and want to read the lives of the saints simply to guess the date they died. I mean, it sounds crazy, but it worked.
Oh, yeah. We had kids who would read ahead, and then the other kids would get mad about it. It's like, you read ahead.
Right. Exactly. You cheated. It's like, no, I just learned about the saints. I mean, come on. Yeah.
Score. But no, that's exactly true. Part of the that's actually in my list of structure for each individual day, is that you have the dependable prayer time. You have the lives of the saints in the liturgical year. I mean, you need to make that part of your life. And one of my favorite things, because I like to eat and I love to decorate, we would do up the saints' days. Not every single one, because you'll get worn out on that really fast. But yeah, the name saints for your kids, their feast days, you try to make them special. I mean, we would have we had a bulletin board that when the kids got older, I had them decorate them sometimes. The girls, your sisters, loved to do that, but you boys didn't care. But we would decorate for the feast days. We had a bulletin board of the week coming up or the month coming up, depending upon how big my bulletin board was. We would have, when we had the big whiteboard, we would have the quote for the saint of the day or whatever on it, and we would try to make it incorporate the lives of the saints in a way that's joyful and fun. And good grief, Google it. And I've got a lot of them on my blog too.
Yeah.
There are so many what are they called, fairs, and in Europe. They have big saint days, like Santa Lucia is a huge day. In Italy, is it Naples? Where is that? I forget now. But
St. Lucy's she's in Venice. We actually saw her chapel. Yeah.
Oh, we did. That's right. How could I forget that? We actually saw her cathedral. But yeah, just Google it and find that saint, and you will find special food for the day.
Right.
Special traditions that are done in wherever, Italy, Germany, wherever it is. And it is so much fun. You learn geography, you learn to cook, you can bring in so much fun stuff, and the kids love it. And actually I love it because, eating and decorating. And it's just, you can bring so much joy into your Catholic home. And don't wait, if your kids are enrolled in parochial schools, or if they're in the Catholic school, don't think that that's just for the school to do. It really needs to be part of your family life. It's important for the children to see mom and dad practicing and enjoying the faith and the beautiful, rich history and tradition of the church through the ages. It is so much fun just to look up. You would be shocked. I mean, every day has a special feast day of some kind, almost every single day.
Sure. Well, I mean, up until a few hundred years ago, or say 100 years ago, Christendom. Christendom is I guess 100 since 100 years it's gone. But before that, I mean, for 500 years, even 1,000 years, your entire culture in Europe, the entire everything was based around Christianity. Everything, your entire life was based around it. I mean, in your free time, you'd go and you'd build mud rocks to put in the church, and you would do all of your feast days, all of your parties, all of everything you did was based around the church. And it wasn't just because you were a good person. That was just how it was. Your entire world was Catholic, and that's something that obviously we will never have as a culture. It won't happen. But exactly. You build that. And I think that, as you say, there's hundreds of years of these traditions that you can pull from, and I think it is beautiful. And I think that the Catholic Church, the Catholic faith, our religion does have hard things. You do need prayer and sacrifice and penance, and kids do need to see that. They need to see death. I mean, kids should go to funerals, I think, every now and then, at least at a certain age. I mean, there are certain things that are hard and they're not nice and you don't enjoy them. But I think that you can mix them with really, really enjoyable things like feasting, like partying. I told Ina I was reading my Catholic faith the other day, and I didn't know this, but there is, I don't know if it's a sacramental, but you can wear it's called Our Lady of Lourdes dress, or I don't know what the exact wording was, but you can wear, it's a white dress with a blue sash, and it's actually like a blessed dress. It's I don't think it's a sacramental, but it's an officially approved dress for the church. So on a Feast of Our Lady or something, you can go and wear an actual outfit honoring Our Lady of Lourdes that is actually approved by the Catholic Church. I think that's just one of those things that I didn't know that, and I think that's a pretty neat thing. That, hey, why not? Why not go and get a white dress and a blue sash and say, hey, why are you wearing that? Well, I'm wearing it for Our Lady of Lourdes. I mean, I think it's endless.
Little girls go crazy for things like that. I mean,
right.
Stress. I mean, and we have how many granddaughters? A bazillion granddaughters, 7 or 8, 10, 11. I don't know. We have mostly granddaughters, and they are ape over princesses.
Right.
But the beautiful thing is that, I mean, your sister Michelle's family, ask them who their princess is, and they will tell you. They are as in tune with Saint Philomena and Saint Elizabeth of Hungary. One of them is Saint Elizabeth of Hungary, who's my saint. So I'm like, score,
right?
Grandma. But they are as in tune with that as, they know the Disney princesses. You're not going to escape that. And you know what? It's not necessarily an evil thing, depending upon how you do it. But they know they're heavenly princesses,
right.
And that's the key. You can take so much of Catholicism in your children and in your own heart should not be a burden to you.
Right.
It should be a tool. It should be a tool to help you over the burdens of life. And is that hard sometimes? Well, yeah, life is hard. But the church and what the church gives us and how it helps us is a tool to help us over the burdens. And if that's your mindset, and if that's the mindset you teach your children, they're equipped in this very difficult world. And you do need a bubble. I don't care who will disagree with me on that. And there are people who will disagree with me on that. In this world, you need, as a Catholic, to live in your own little bubble. Yes, you do. And protect the walls of that bubble like crazy, and part of your family planning needs to be, how am I going to teach my child to discern between good and evil without exposing them too much to good and evil, or to evil, and then that's a whole other discussion. Actually, there's a lot that goes into that, but it's a very, very important consideration for parents today that you do need to have your little world where they know good and they know evil and they stay away from it, but they know and see good, and they and you live within you've got the Feast of St. Mark coming up, which is the day that you go around and you bless the four corners of your property. If you don't know about that, Google it because it's awesome.
And pray the Litany of the Saints, I think.
The Litany of the Saints. Yeah. And you take your little jars. You remember taking the little jars of holy water and putting them in the four corners of the property. Right. And your little bit of palm. And Dad would walk around with all the children following in a line. And we would bless the four corners of our property. And gosh, there's a lot of just good in that and memories. And you're blessing your property. That's really kind of important too. And we're getting ready to do that. And we get to have all the little toddlers follow around now. The grandchildren get to follow around the four corners, which is going to be fun. But these are the memories that you want your children. I think it's important to incorporate into your family plan as many warm fuzzies as you can. And this is a warm fuzzy that your memories when you grow up, when your child grows up, you want them to look back on their childhood with just happy memories that are all mixed up in the faith. Now, does that mean you can't go to baseball games? Well, of course you can. Well, I wouldn't go to baseball games in America right now personally, but you can enjoy sports. You can, do those things, but keep the most important memories that they are going to come back to. Make them want to raise their family to have the comfort and the strong arms of the church around them too. That you wouldn't even think about raising your child without the protection and the comfort of our Catholic faith. You wouldn't want your child to even consider it. That would be the craziest thing in their mind, would be not going to Good Friday Tre Ore. What? You wouldn't do that? You wouldn't. You would want it to be the farthest thing from their mind that you wouldn't raise your child with the same happy, warm feelings that you remember from your own childhood. Right.
Well, and eventually you have to, when your kids get to be 16, 17, 18, it can't be your faith that they believe anymore, right? It has to be their faith. They have to, I know you've talked about that before, that they have to accept it and really bring it as their own. And you see in the world today, it's unfortunately far too common that people in that age and maybe a little older, they leave and they decide, it's my parents' faith, it's not mine. I think that's as you say, that's why you have to get them to love it, not just to do it. It's not just a command. It's not just I'm telling you to do this and so you must. Some things you do. So, of course, if they say I don't want to go to church, on a Sunday, you say, I don't care, you're my child and you're going to church. So, I mean, of course, sometimes you do have to enforce it, but I mean, that's why you have to have that balance of, as you say, make sure that they do love it and have the warm fuzzies. And I'd say, I mean, another really important thing for me growing up, and I'm unbelievably fortunate with my background that I was raised obviously in a big Catholic family. I had almost entirely only Catholic friends. And then I went when I was 15 to Omaha to a Catholic boarding school where I became close friends with the sisters and the seminarians and priests. And so I'm incredibly, incredibly blessed in how I was brought up. And I'm still, unfortunately, a terrible sinner, as I'm sure everyone knows how that goes. But I think that friends are an extremely important part to how your kids end up. So I guess I would ask you, how do you advise parents to give the best likelihood, I guess, that your kids have good friends?
Yeah, that's a very good question. In fact, we were just talking about that too. In our experience of watching, I'm in my mid 50s and all the different Catholic families that I have seen, and the ones that have almost every fallen away young adult that I have seen, you can trace back to them getting into a situation where they made close non-Catholic friends. Now, does that mean that you have to turn your nose up at everybody who's not a Catholic? No. Not at all. And you can't. I mean, you got to live in the world. You got to work in the world. But to the extent, I don't even want to say to the extent that it is possible, as a parent, you have to go out of your way to figure out within your own realm how to make sure your kids' best friends and your best friends are Catholics. I mean, it's just as simple as that. You don't think it's going to change the way your brain works. It's not going to change your heart. It's not going to change your actions. Oh, yeah, well, you can say that, but it will. It will. I've experienced it myself. I mean, I have fallen in that direction myself. So I know very well it's just simply true. And the devil's going to try to tell you over and over, oh, it doesn't matter. It matters who your friends are. It really matters. As homeschoolers, it was very simple for us. We just chose your friends.
Right.
It's like, okay,
right.
We love this family. We're going to hang out with this family. But it's a funny thing because so many people think that homeschoolers are non-social beings. Oh, my stars. Is that the opposite of the truth? It is so not true. Homeschoolers are the most sociable people I know. I think there may be some exceptions to that, but boy, not in my life. I think that homeschoolers grow up without the preconceived notions of bully and bullied. They don't grow up with the same kind of competitive or peer pressure. It's really peer pressure, thinking that you have to do what everybody does. Homeschoolers don't have that. And they don't care what you think usually. I mean, some do, but in a different way. They have a different confidence. Everyone that I've ever met has a different confidence, can interact better with adults. They're almost always better leaders. I mean, just because they don't have the same peer pressure issues that you have in a conventional school setting. When you go to Catholic schools, you can have the problem of running into children who are raised differently than your children. And you are going to have to address that sometimes on a daily basis. We know because we've done it too, especially under the age of about 15. At about 15, a child's usually pretty well formed. And hopefully by that point, they know how to discern and can decide what kind of friends they want to have. Especially if you've done your job as a Catholic parent and brainwashed them really, really well. And brainwashing is not always a bad thing, people. Brainwashing. You wash out the bad, make sure there's good in that brain. And I think that if you're homeschooling, it's really quite easy, I think, to help your child learn to discern friendships. And it's a lot of it's language. And we talk a lot about language here because I'm a language kind of gal, but how you say things makes the biggest difference in the world. Oh, we get to go play with so-and-so today. We get to go to Jesus's house. I mean, how you present the world to your child in language makes a huge difference. We, as human beings, we function on story. It's how we work, either verbal or written, or it doesn't matter. The story that you create for your child, even it sounds like it's a very artificial thing to do, but whether you like it or not, your life is a story. It tells a story to your child, your life. And whether you mean it to, whether you plan it, or whether it just happens, you are telling a story to your child that they are going to carry along in some way or form through the rest of their lives. And if you tell them the story early on, if you teach them early on, and if you have a particularly good friend as an adult, and your children hear you saying, you're talking to your wife or your husband, and you're saying, I just love hanging around with the so-and-sos because they are just the happiest people and they love God just like we do. Now, your 3-year-old hears that. Now, don't think that doesn't get into your 3-year-old's head. Of course it does.
Right.
And it's not even that you need to badmouth people who are bad, that are bad influences. You can just kind of stay away from them. And then the people that are good, you consciously remark on goodness. When we would be walking through, the few times in our lives we walked through malls, honestly, with my girls, I remember specifically one incident. We were walking through a mall, and we were pointing out the girls that were dressed modestly. Oh, isn't that a pretty dress? And the girl behind the counter, oh, that is the prettiest dress. You look so nice. Mom makes sure to remark upon that. And that's not a lecture, but it's a lesson. And it's a real life lesson that your child is going to learn, that you don't even need to remark on people that are badly dressed, though sometimes it's so glaringly obvious you might need to remark, or just say, let's look over here, kids, But you create the story of your life, whether you know it or not. You create the story of your children's lives, whether you know it or not. Your language, the things that you say, the places that you go, how you spend your vacations, making sure that you go on vacation where you know you have Mass, says far more to your child than you ever think. Yeah. It means that this is my priority. I'm not going to the town where I know I can go to this sporting event. I'm going to this town because there's fun things to see and there's Mass. So you don't even have to say it. You're teaching with the example of your choices. And these are things that are embedded far deeper than any lecture, especially any lecture after the fact, mind you, that you ever will make. It's you tell the story of your life bit by bit, word by word, action by action. And that's why I say that planning these things and understanding and mindfully knowing yourself what you want your family to be, because we are all on board with our goal, and our goal is heaven. That's the way to corral your kids around and try to protect them from bad worldly influences. Right.
And in that plan, you can plan, what they're taking into their heads. I mean, especially with media and books and stuff these days. I mean, would you rather, as you said before, would you rather these little girls have the influence of St. Philomena and St. Catherine of Alexandria, or these frozen princesses that are totally immoral and even somewhat immodest? And I think that, and the crazy thing is, I think people, again, they think of it as like, but the saints are just, come on, they're these old people living in old huts that struck themselves and cried all the time. I think that's really what people think sometimes. And honestly, I read the entire year of the saints from Reverend Butler, and there are some saints who did that. That's true. But there are also saints. I mean, St. Catherine of Alexandria is an unbelievable saint. She was so smart. She was the smartest person in like probably the entire Middle East. She had people coming to her to judge, countries and make decisions on rules and all these things. This is some young woman back in the day she's like amazing story. And St. Philomena is an incredible story. And to imagine a 12, 13, 14-year-old girl standing up to the emperor of the world, really. I mean, really, Rome was half the world. And she just stood up and said, no, Sorry. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, this is way more interesting and fascinating and cool than these stupid little princesses that whine and moan and disobey their parents. I mean, I don't want to get into Disney right now, but good grief, stay away from Disney. It's poison. It's absolutely poison. And when you compare that poison to what we have that you can give these kids, it's so much better. Or even, I mean, good books too. I mean, Tolkien, or there's plenty of good stuff that you can put into your kids' hands. And I think that's in my opinion, that's so important now, because especially with technology, everything's available at a click. And boy, oh boy, I think if there's anything that I'm going to have to really be careful with my kids, is that's it. And I think, as you say, the primary thing, at least from what I've taken from your advice, is lead a good life. I mean, you have to be the example, and you have to be the one trying to get to heaven first. And as the parents, you also have the responsibility of doing that for your kids. And so you have to try kind of double hard. That, I mean, if I don't lead, if I don't pray, then they're not either. They're going to follow me. They're going to follow what I do and what I say. They're going to follow, as you say, the story that I write of my life, which obviously should help us also get ourselves to heaven. But it's also, I think, that, and then, watch what you're putting into their minds. If it's by what you say or what you give them, what they're allowed. I don't care if my 12-year-old wants an iPhone. Tough luck. I mean, that I know it's hard. I'm sure you have peer pressure. I mean, here in Germany, homeschooling is illegal. You cannot homeschool. So that's a whole nother topic we're gonna have to figure out in the next 10 years, I suppose, which, God willing, it changes. If not, we may have to do something drastic. We don't know. But anyway, we may unfortunately have to have at least a few years of public school, and that's going to be a whole challenge of its own. And so then, you have to be, even as young kids, they're going to have in their head when they go to school, what can I look on my friend's phone and what can I not? And boy, I think that's tough.
Yeah, right. Well, and as if you're throwing a Catholic kid in amongst a bunch of secular kids at best, they are going to stand out. You have to teach them to be strong enough and to understand that they are not going to be like everyone else, and that's a good thing. And you have to, that's how you make Catholic leaders. You have to not mind standing out, because you're standing out for God. The saints stood out like sore thumbs in their own time. Right. To most of the world, they did. I mean, our Lord did. Our Lord stood out like a sore thumb. He had a couple moments of glory, and then most of it was not, while he was on the earth. But it's you're going up that down escalator, carrying your kids on your back, and hoping that when you put them down, you will have already trained them to be walking double time, because they will have to walk double time in this life. I mean, and more. And it could get worse. I foresee it getting worse, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have to be joyful either. I mean, right. It's, and I think that is one of the things that is a stumbling block, like you have said, that it's leading a Catholic life, a really Catholic life, doesn't mean you're this backward person wearing a gunny sack and beating yourself over the head, with your prayer book. I mean, it's really, really not. I mean, we've had a ball. And I think that there's so much fun. I mean, there's so many times that we've gone to parties and, have you ever watched sisters in full habit playing volleyball? I'm serious. It's the religious have a wonderful time. They're happy people. The Catholic families I know that we get together with are just the happiest people. We have the biggest parties. Oh, my stars. And there is just they're goofballs, because, traditional Catholics do not conform. So they're pretty goofy sometimes, but it's a lot of fun. But the thing is, you have to decide that. Put that in your family plan. We are going to not only be good Catholics, but we're going to be joyful Catholics. And you have to decide that you're going to be joyful. You're not always going to feel joyful. There are those moments when you're not going to feel at all joyful. But the big picture, the big picture of your life, the chief goal of your life should be that you are going to love God. And love is a happy thing, but love is also a really, really hard thing. Look at Calvary. But the final goal is a very happy thing. And the Catholic life is a joyful life. It's not always easy, but it's a joyful life, and you have to make it that way. I think
Right.
that's one of the things that I can't say enough, is that you have to decide that is the family life that you want, and then you have to make the plan. How is my day going to look, my basic day? How am I going to organize my week, my month, so that we are not only, following the rules, which of course we must do, but how are we also having fun? How are we looking at the lives of the saints? Or like we always had our together time you were talking about earlier. Several of your siblings have said the same thing to me, and I don't even think, at the time I didn't even realize it, that was their favorite part of the day. Together time, when we would say our prayers and we would read the lives of the saints, and we'd guess the year, and then we would read whatever the book du jour was, and that has stuck with all of your siblings too, and me. That was my favorite time. It's like, okay, let's hurry up and get through math so we can do this.
Right. Well, and at the end, I mean, once we got to be older, we would still do that. We would have that day, and then because we had, I was the second oldest, so we had younger siblings that they would go through that point. The younger kids would go to bed, and then we would stay up, the older ones, and have philosophical or theological conversations for hours sometimes, and that meant a lot. And I think that was, it was, again, there was just I don't even know how to say it. There was a comfort in knowing that was a time of depth, or something. I don't know how to express it, but it really was important to have that time, and to know that we could, have questions and talk about it. And I think that's, as kids get older, obviously kids are going to have questions about everything. And I think that since I knew there was a time and a space of the day or of the week when I could ask a question and it would be okay, I guess, because I think kids are oftentimes afraid of their parents, and sometimes maybe for rightful reasons. They should be a little afraid of their parents. But I think that's really important, that I think that and I don't know about the rest of my siblings, but I think they did too, could feel that comfort of, okay, I can, if I have a problem with this, I can ask. Because there are plenty of things about our faith that I still don't know. Many of it, we don't know all the questions about our faith. I mean, for goodness sake, that's why it's called faith, right? I mean, there are things we don't actually know. We just have to have faith on. But I think that's also important. Maybe if you have older kids, to really give them that time of philosophical or theological conversation. And maybe as a parent, you got to bring it up, or you got to start it, or talk about things that might be complicated in the sermon or whatever it is. Because I think kids need to know that they can ask. And I think that's a really important thing, to be able to converse with your kids, and kids not to be afraid. That's something I've really noticed in families that have maybe broken up. I've noticed a bit of a trend that friends is a big one, really big, and the culture that's allowed into their lives with media and whatnot. But also, were they ever able to communicate with their parents?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you're right. I think you have to respect your children's intelligence, and you don't bend on it, mind you. I mean, truths are truths, and you can be confident in that, and your children know that. But you should respect your children's intelligence. I think some of my favorite memories growing up, and I look forward to it this summer when your brothers get back from the minor seminary, is taking one-on-one time with your children, so that if there's a question that they might be a little uncomfortable talking about amongst everyone else, we would go on hikes, and I would take the kids out one bar shopping if it was the girls, so that, and not, maybe once a summer, something like that, so that if you needed to air something, you could air it, and that, it was just one-on-one time that was just for you. It's important. I mean, and you need to do that with your spouse too. Oh, by the way, that is something to write into your plan. There does need to be blowing off steam time. I mean, just relaxing, getting away from the crowd. That's a very important thing too. That could be a whole other podcast. But getting one-on-one time with your children, so that not just it's important in the family structure too, and your together time, but also one-on-one is really important too. And I learned from you guys. I still do. I still learn from my own children. It's like, oh, and especially since so many of them have instruction from religious. I'm like, okay, your sister would come back from school and I'm like, all right, what did you learn from the bishop today?
Right.
Fill me in. I didn't get to be there. So fill me in. But she still does that. She's so funny. She writes me letters. She's a novice for anybody who doesn't know. And she's allowed to write. She's hilarious. She's the same kid.
Same kid. Same crazy. And now Sister Evangeline, formerly Anna. Yeah. She's a nut.
Yeah. I know, and I can't stress enough. You're exactly right. You need to have that kind of relationship with your children. That you're not buddies. It was the best thing in the world to me when you children were finally of that age, when you're adults, and it's like, okay, all right, we can relax the parent-child,
right,
and can be more friends. It's never quite the same as exactly a friend, but much more like a friend. And like I say, you teach me now. So that's a wonderful thing to realize as a parent, that you can learn from your child. Be listening, because even your youngest children can teach you things or bring up questions. It's like, oh, I never thought of that before, and then you have to go find out. But yeah, I think the structure of your family needs to absolutely include that discussion time. And that doesn't have to be even structured. Just so that everybody's comfortable talking amongst, because you're never going to, if your child isn't comfortable to talk to you, who are they going to talk to if they've got a problem? And that's where you can run into some big problems. You lose your kids if they're talking to the wrong person and getting the wrong answers, worldly answers. And I say worldly like it's a bad word, because
it is. Right. It is a bad word. Yeah. Well, Mom, I think it's a good place to wrap it up. I mean, there's so many things we brought up that makes me want to have another show. I honestly want to talk about, do a whole show about homeschooling. I think just the idea of it, how to approach that. I mean, the importance of it. I mean, because I think that there are still people out there, I think less in the US, more here in Europe, that really frown on homeschooling and the level of education that you can give someone. That's something I'd really like to talk about, because I think it's something that you know very well, and that I think that is viable to this time as well, that I think people would find valuable. And I think also I'd like to talk to you about being married, being a spouse with a lot of kids, because I think that's something that is also extremely important. That I talked a little bit with Chicky, but she's still very young. You're a little more the experienced wife with 10 children. So maybe we can do a
struggling wife
with it never ends. Yeah, it's always the little things.
Yeah. You've read that G.K. Chesterton quote. So his quotes about marriage are hilarious. Marriage is sort of like a war. Yeah.
Sounds like Chesterton. Right. Exactly.
This is coming. Happily married person, so
exactly. Well, and I'd say too that if anyone doesn't already know your blog, I'll attach a link to this video. It's really great. You got a lot of stuff that goes back years and years. Boy, it's got to be almost 20 years now. I guess 15 years at least. And you're still keeping up with it. I think doing the Saints, which we'll definitely have to do again for May. We missed in April because I was taking time off.
I missed April.
So you missed April too. It wasn't just me. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get back to it for May. And another resource that I know we've both found really good is the Maria von Trapp book, the Around the Year with the Von Trapps. Yes, it is the Von Trapps from the Sound of Music movie. She has a really great book that kind of gives season by season ideas for parties and recipes and songs and different things that they did. And it's neat for us because she was just really 45 minutes away from where we live. She was over in the mountains in Salzburg, so very close to us. So many of her traditions are now our traditions here in Bavaria. And she also moved to the US. So they have really the split traditions of German and American. And really great book, really great ideas. I know you found during our childhood too, that we're still finding that are very nice. So I highly recommend that book. I'll maybe attach that also in the show notes. Highly recommend. Any Catholic family should have that book. I think it's very, very nice, very helpful little tool that's very simple, but has some very, very cool little ideas, I think. Mom, do you have any last words or?
Yeah, I was just going to mention there's another one. If you could find it, I think it's still in print, called My Name Day, Come for Dessert.
Okay.
Yeah. So just for name day type things. It's literally
is that by her too? Von Trapp?
No.
Okay.
No. but we use them kind of in tandem.
Okay.
So yeah, just if we're talking about having a joyful Catholic family, dessert is a part of that. So
definitely. And beer is too.
Right.
There is a patron saint of beer, and I mean, again, obviously in moderation, of course, but and everything as Catholics, that's kind of the rule. All things, and have a good time, but don't sin, right? I think St. John Bosco said that. So on that note, Mom, thank you very much for coming on. We will be back for hopefully other shows and similar topics. I would also say that I will maybe attach your email if you're okay with that, so that if anyone has any questions for you, which they might, maybe mothers want to ask you something, your advice, it's better to ask you than to me. I'm not an experienced parent or mother, so I will send that to you if you're okay with me publishing your email. Sure. If you're not, then I can send it through mine. But please, if anyone has any questions, she has lots of experience. She has one son who is a priest, two who are nuns, and two who are in the minor seminary. So far, I guess something must be going right. And that's not even mentioning the ex-Marine and the electrician and the good mothers that you have as children. So far, everyone's doing all right. So if anyone has any parental advice, you're not perfect. Obviously, you would say that too. You're not perfect. You don't have all the answers. But if anyone wants to chat, I know. I mean, I'm sure young mothers. I mean, maybe they do have some questions that they would like to ask. If you do, please send that to her over her email. So, Mom, again, thank you very much, and until next time, God bless.
All right, God bless, Kevin.
You've been listening to the Catholic Family Podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please share it with your friends and family. You can support the production on Patreon and PayPal, and you can reach Kevin at kevin89davis@gmail.com. Ad maiorem Dei gloriam, all for the greater glory of God.